Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary and Fox News contributor, Katie Pavlich, townhall.com editor and Fox News contributor. I like that Chad used the word dissonance, right? A lack of harmony. But that was a lot more than, I mean, Katie, this is...
That's a nice word.
Yeah, but it wasn't like, that was a great a confrontation, for lack of a better word, in the hall. And me think of maybe someone protests too much.
Look, Hakeem Jeffries delivered, right, for the Democratic Party, who said they wanted to oppose President Trump. They voted against this continuing resolution in the House, sent it over to the Senate. Basically now he's being betrayed by Senator Chuck Schumer, who, by the way, got everyone to come out in public statements to say we're not voting for this continuing resolution yesterday and the day before. And now, all of a sudden, last night, he has to cave because they start realizing the light bulb goes off. Well, if we shut down the government, then only the essential workers are there in the federal government, which then highlights exactly what the president and Elon Musk have been saying about government bloat and the need for federal workers. So if we only need essential workers throughout a shutdown, what does that mean for the rest of them?
But I read that that was going to happen months ago. Like, you know, after Trump won, that was one of the first showdowns, right? And what about, I think it could even be more personal. The Schumer shutdown had a really good ring to it. It just kind of dribbled off the tongue. I don't know that he wanted to be known for the Schumer shutdown.
But Charles, also, let's set the table and realize this spending bill that the Democrats are saying is so draconian. We have to resist President Trump. This was passed at last year's funding levels, which meant it was passed by Chuck Schumer, who controlled the Senate last year, and signed by Joe Biden into law. That's what the spending level is that they now say we can't support. And Katie's exactly right. If this leads to a government shutdown, Elon Musk is going to sit there, and so will the head of Office of Management and Budget, Russell Vought, and say, we think the federal government has a lot fewer essential people than used to. This is a great thing that they did to shut down the government, the Democrats. They're playing with fire, and they shouldn't do it.
When Jeffries got upset there, he might have, I know there's such a thing as loyal opposition, but he sort of just blurted out that they're going to go against everything that Trump is doing. In other words, and I think when the American people see things like that, listen, we want to have parties that are opposite. There are also things that should unify us. And the notion that he just admitted, Katie, we're going to go after everything. We're here to stop every part of Trump's agenda, no matter whether, we're not going to weigh whether it's good or bad for the American public. We're going to push back against it all.
So what does that translate to in terms of policy and what's next? So the Republicans wanted to get the CR passed so they can then get on to the president's agenda, because as you point out, this is actually Joe Biden's agenda. We're still in the Biden hangover in terms of all the policies that are still on the books that they're working off of. So what does this mean for the future? President Trump wants to get a bill together that extends the Trump tax cuts permanently, because if that doesn't pass, Americans get a tax hike, including Democrats who are represented by these House members who are pushing back on the entire Trump agenda. It also means that they're going to move forward with no taxes on tips, Social Security, a whole host of items that are very popular among the American people, including in districts that Democrats control. And so they can push back against this, but that gives Republicans an opening for the communication standpoint to say, okay, then they're for a tax hike for 80% of the country. They can start using that to their advantage.
Let's talk about the other big, one of the other big items today in the Department of Education, this investigation, over 50 universities for racial discrimination, Ari.
It's a welcome thing. There should be no discrimination. That is what America stands for. And you can't solve any problems that we have with race in this country by having reverse discrimination. It makes everybody come out worse. So what the administration is saying to educational institutions is, if you want your money, toe the line and don't discriminate against anybody. How much more red, white, and blue can we be than that? That is a common sense action. So I welcome this. I think it's overdue.
Yeah, I was really thrilled when finally the Supreme Court, you know, the Asian students who've been shut out of a lot of elite universities. And of course, on the other side of this is, when you give someone something they didn't necessarily earn, then why would anyone ever work hard for anything?
Right.
You know, it just was a lose-lose ultimately, I think, for America.
Well, when these DEI policies started getting implemented in corporate America probably about a decade ago, and then the universities started implementing them thinking they were doing a good thing, DEI inherently requires discrimination against another group, because it requires you judge based on skin color, for example, or based on gender. And the fact is that those kinds of policies are illegal. They are violations of the Civil Rights Act, and this Department of Justice is going to go after companies and university campuses that still have them, because they are a violation of individual rights and student rights. And the Biden administration let them get away with it. They let them get away
Well,
with
they
that. But
promoted
the laws
it.
are on the books.
Weren't they a proxy for it?
Yes, absolutely.
In many ways?
So they were ignoring long-standing law that treats Americans equally for the sake of their own political ambitions, and this DOJ is having none of it.
And I think what you're going to find is people are going to shine. When you get rid of this, people are going to shine on the basis of merit, regardless of their heritage or background. And they're going to, that is what our country is built on.
Do you feel that, though, whatever happens, a lot of these entities, whether it's companies or universities, may be so wedded to these things, they'll try to rebrand it, rename it, put it away briefly, and try to bring it back out, hoping that maybe the next president will be a Democrat?
You know, Charles, on the campuses, the problem's the faculty. I think a lot of administrations would like to start moving into this direction, but the faculty is so overwhelmingly to the left that it's going to be hard for them to make those changes. But if they don't get there, this administration is going to take away their funding, so they're going to get there.
And then in the private sector, the corporations now have to make a calculation about legal risks. So how much is it going to cost a company like Costco, for example, who's continuing with these DEI policies despite being on notice from DOJ, to fight a lawsuit from the Department of Justice? So they will try to rename it in some of these aspects, but it becomes a bottom line issue for them as well in terms of how much capital they're willing to spend to keep these policies in place, which are illegal and discriminatory.
Yeah. I mean, I think a Costco would probably fight until the next election. I mean, this is why you can't just win one election, like, the flip-flopping of back and forthing. I want to kind of pick up on this, though, but President Trump cutting off these funds to universities. Katie, you've been talking about this for a long time, and now everyone's asking, why would some of these universities even be getting taxpayer money at all? Harvard has $50 billion. Princeton has $34 billion. Columbia has $15 billion. Penn has $21 billion. Yale has $41 billion. Why do they need taxpayer money?
They do not need a single cent of taxpayer money, and this influx of taxpayer money has made them unaccountable to any of their own actions. There's no accountability for results when they're getting hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer funding. And as we've seen, it's allowed them to implement these discriminatory programs and also to enable rioting on campus when there's no responsibility for making sure that they keep law and order and they keep their students safe. So they have endowments of $15 billion at Columbia, for example. We should be taxing them, not taking money from American taxpayers and giving it to these institutions, which we've seen are very far left and discriminatory against certain groups of students on campus.
But it's also true that all these universities know how to raise money. They have donors, they have alumni with a lot of money. If these programs, and many of them are meritorious, they don't need taxpayer money. They will be able to raise it because it's a worthy program from their existing donor pool, from people who support what they're doing, from the charitable sector. All this to say, why does the government and the taxpayers have to be the ones who fund everything in our society? If these programs are good, and many of them are, they're going to find funding in the private sector.
There's this, crazy establishment thinking, like, why would I couldn't think of myself taking that kind of money, knowing it came from people who are cab drivers or real estate agents that are struggling. Like, how would I even think I deserve to be on this perch above all of them? And by the way, they're also paying for my electric vehicle. They pay for my college loans. I mean, it's just, you've got to be in a serious different mindset to think that you are so much better than everyone else that they should be paying for all this stuff.
Amen to that.
Katie, Ari, have a great weekend.
Great to
Thank you both very much.